Hey everyone, here's a little taster of the Heathers Movie Club featuring Peaches Christ and Cherry Torn. The full show's about 2 hours long, and you can get this and all the other movie clubs by going over to patreon.com/CraigandFriends and signing up for the Movie Club tier. When you sign up for the Movie Club tier, you also get all of the listener questions episodes, all of the bonus episodes, and some other fun stuff. Movie clubs on the horizon include 9 to 5, featuring Karen from Finance and Jake Shears. We're taping that next Tuesday, so if you do sign up, you'll still have time to add your comments and questions. And in a few more weeks, Tammy Brown will be joining me for Tootsie. So enjoy this highlight reel of the Heathers Movie Club, and while you're listening, go over to patreon.com/CraigandFriends, sign up, and slide on into the Thunderbuns of Hot Dog Club. Question from Lindsay Rose, who wants to know, Peach is my hometown queen and Gregory my future Secretary of State, and implicitly Cherry Torn as well, because this was an addition after the question was asked. The questions are, what do you think is the most iconic moment of Heathers? And we'll start with you, Peaches.
The most iconic moment? My goodness.
This is the favorites thing. This is the tricky bit.
It's really, really tricky because that film is just so incredible. But I think because of what it's about and who it's about,
yes.
I think one of the most iconic moments is when, just before Heather Chandler, smashes into that glass coffee table and she says the words corn nuts.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's like here's it's the darkest comedy, and what's happening is so dark and so awful, and you kind of realize in that moment, oh, they're really doing this. They're really going there. This is happening. That is the movie.
It really is. Yeah. She is incredibly miserable in every way. At the college party in particular, I'd forgotten about the scene where after she blows the guy, she spits at herself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Like the level of self-hatred in it, which you're not really sort of aware of with her until that
moment, right? And then the sweet afterlife moment, my afterlife is so boring.
Yeah, right.
You actually kind of feel for her in a way, but it's that spitting moment
that changes it.
That really it brings the high school bitch to a deeper level, because it's like she didn't really want to be blowing the guy. She doesn't like herself. She's just doing whatever she can, and that whole scene outside with the fire going and that confrontation, that dialogue there.
Oh, that's incredible. That is one of my favorite moments.
That might be the most. I can't choose just one.
Well, I think that whole sequence, the whole party sequence, because rewatching it this time, and I hadn't seen it in a number of years, I don't think I realized when I was a kid watching it that clearly Veronica has been roofied.
Right. Yeah,
and that's, I guess, why the beer is on fire or something. As a kid, you just think it's this like sort of cool thing that's going on, because also the movie does exist in a semi-dreamscape.
It does. It's a fantasy kind of movie.
It totally is. Like when it goes to the dream sequence, you're not even really aware.
Right.
For 3 minutes.
It does, and it does all of that clever shit, which we don't do anymore because we just hammer people over the head with what's actually happening. But there's all this implication, and if you're not paying attention, you could miss it. Like even the bulimia moment, you're like.
Oh,
wait,
yeah.
You're like, wait, what? Wait, did that just happen?
Yeah.
Grow up, Heather. Bulimia is so 87.
And I just want to say as a whore, there are 2 incredibly relatable moments in this. I can't say iconic. I will say relatable for me moments where I'm like, oh, okay, that's real. Not only does she go into the stall to make herself puke, but her gag reflex is so gone, she needs a friend to do it.
Right.
And I've said that a million times. People have been like, oh, do you have an eating disorder? And I'm like, hell no. If I my gag reflex is so gone, to be bulimic, I would need someone to fucking fuck my face all the time. It's like being tickled. You can tickle yourself, but you can't have someone else. But that bonding moment, and the fact she's done it a million times before, and it was just so casual.
Yeah, they're so regular about it. They're just like, oh yeah, gonna have another look at today's lunch.
Yeah. True friends' work is never done.
And then later, when Heather is killed, Shannon Doherty is suddenly able to eat her ham hock or whatever it is.
Yeah, she's in the locker room, just honking off a rib, and they're like,
watch it, Heather. You might be digesting food there. Yeah, where's your urge to purge? Fuck it.
Fuck it. I love that. And then that moment where they're okay, I can't totally remember the scene, but there's sort of, that's what it is. And she comes back from that date where they have the horrible with the drunk guy, and then he's he's come and gossiped to like all the people in the school around her and said that like she had this threesome and got spit roasted or whatever.
I rarely listen to Neanderthals like Kurt Kelly, but he said that he and Ram had a nice little sword fight in your mouth last night. You know what I mean?
It's so relatable. It's like they know it's not true, but they want to believe it's true.
And the way
They're
he's like,
don't
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we were talking earlier about how pretty much every guy in this movie is loathsome. I mean, maybe not Veronica's dad, right? But Christian Slater, obviously. Problematic.
Yeah.
Kurt and Ram, obviously.
Yeah.
But then even that guy.
He's seemingly the nice guy.
Yeah,
but he's not.
He's not.
Isn't
That's
that
right.
just the
That's
fucking
right.
lesson of life that the nice guy is the one you need to look out for the fucking most?
And then he's kind of bragging about how him and Heather went out.
Right.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you're like, at the funeral, he's like, yeah, you know, Heather said it was boring, but like, obviously she just hated her life.
And then in the TV coverage when he's talking about how he bought her the rhino at the fair. I love too the general overall worldview that the movie presents, which is also summed up by the mother later on when she's like, well, you kids say you want to be treated like a human being. It's usually because you're being treated like a human being. How do you think adults work?
Right.
That's so accurate.
The movie, as far as iconic moments go, and just like listening to this stuff, I'm realizing like it's kind of like a John Waters movie in a way.
Right.
If you look at an early John Waters movie like Female Trouble, I mean, they're not necessarily perfect movies, but by and large, the dialogue is so inspired throughout. Like, it's so clever. It's so witty. It's so, you look at Heather's and you go, every other line is amazing. The dialogue is incredible.
Yeah, and it's a rhythm to it too.
Yes.
And almost a rhyming structure, kind of.
Yeah.
And it's its own lingo. Like, it's in this dreamscape world, but everything in it is like tied to each other.
Right. And people wish they could talk like that. We all aspire, but nobody talks like that.
No one.
I remember being obsessed with the movie and just, fuck me gently with a chainsaw. All these lines where it's like a brilliant writer gave these characters this world where they could speak in this incredible way.
Right. And also even the end fight that we were talking about with the end of the party and the vomit. I mean, the viciousness of Heather Chandler saying,
"What's your damage? Brad says you're being a real coos."
That's just so savage and anti-woman.
No, it's horrible. And then you realize that this molding of this sort of minion has been going on since childhood. Right. So it's like she's, threatening her and basically saying, I brought you to a Remington party, and you were nothing before you met me. I forget you were
you should have turned it out. Was that not why I brought you? That's what I hear.
Basically, you're to do my bidding.
And this extra level, which I find very fascinating as a woman, is like, you don't always realize that the misogyny that hits you deepest comes from the places you don't expect, which is like other women who have had misogyny internalized into them, or sometimes even gay men who live in such like a male only environment that like the value of women has been lost. Like there's such a balance. And that movie really, I mean, not to the gay side, but like to this moment of like, you can see she's been trained. The
strangest things about the film, even for when it came out, is that it was so progressive,
right,
and so ahead of its time. It's the first film of its kind post John Hughes, right? Like, so John Hughes had a very specific genre and those movies are wonderful and delicious, but you look back on them now and you're like, whoa, they're so dated, they're so racist, they're so misogynistic.
They're basic, really. They're not made by a progressive person.
It's so white.
There are no feminist, alternative, like none of that John Waters undertone.
No, and it's like almost like Heather's was a mirror to that. Like, oh no, actually, guess what? This is what white high schools are really like.
Right.
This is how they treat each other. This is, the depth of meanness that can exist. And of course, then Heather's changed everything, right? Because it gave birth to Jawbreaker and Mean Girls.
Sure.
And, this whole thing where, we saw the world that way. But being a kid who was like in high school when it came out and becoming obsessed with it, one thing I will say looking back on it, I'm like, there still wasn't any diversity to it as far as, they were all white, which is the world they lived in. And really, there would have been queer kids, involved with the one. There's nothing queer about it other than the way that they talk.
There's not, although there is some undertone, and perhaps this is just wishful thinking where you're like, is Christian Slater's character like a little bit gay?
I don't think so. And if he is, if that's in there, it's still problematic.
Yes.
Because
I think it's just us. I mean, us as in me personally.
Well, is it also maybe because
Hoping and wishing.
he happens to have the these artifacts handy?
Got an issue with Stud Puppy?
Great.
A candy dish?
Candy dish. I love that.
Joan Crawford
Candy
postcard?
dish.
A little Joan Crawford postcard.
Some mascara?
Mascara.
All right. Now here's the one perfecto thing I picked up. Mineral water.
Oh, come on. A lot of people drink mineral water. It's come a long way.
Yeah, but this is Ohio. I mean, if you don't have a brewski in your hand, you might as well be wearing a dress.
In the rewatch, now that we're old queers, obviously, because you don't see this at all when you're not, is like, well, he sure came up with all of that quite conveniently, and perhaps some of that is convincing.
But even that seems so not progressive. I remember
It's
even
terrible.
even at the time, right? It was like these are really dated ideas,
How
like
dare
from
you.
the 50s, which I guess is part of the joke. But it did feel like the sort of the. And as a queer kid, I was obsessed. I mean, my yearbook quote is from Heathers.
Oh, wow. Which
I
one?
was obsessed.
Yes.
Dear God, let me dream of a world without Heathers, a world where I'm free.
Oh, okay.
Because my high school was filled with the meanest. I mean, I went to Catholic high school with a lot of rich kids in Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of blonde, beautiful bitches.
Yeah.
And the weird thing about Heathers now is thinking about the fact that I wore the trench coat, the hairstyle. I had the Doc Martens. I had we had to wear uniforms, so you expressed yourself with all this other stuff.
Sure,
because your coat, your shoes, those were that's about what you could get away with.
Right.
I mean, I had earrings. The school tried to make me take them out.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, said there's nothing in your handbook that says he can't have earrings. My parents were very good at defending my weirdness because I think they realized early on that doing otherwise would backfire.
Yes, right. I remember my parents having a thing where, because I wore, and this is so silly to think about now, like Sex Pistols t-shirts or whatever. And there was this whole quorum at the school worrying that I was like a Satanist or into whatever, just because I was different and had some troubles in school and everything, but was also relentlessly picked on by some people. They didn't want to deal with that.
Right.
At all.
Course.
And then when there was a situation with a bully, they, of course, would blame me and I would get the detention. So it's just that reaffirming and compounding.
And that was totally my story.
Yeah.
And I also stood up for myself and I did kind of become a leader of the weirdos.
Okay, yeah.
So it was sort of this thing where the administration, and I had tons of horror, shit all up in my locker and I was obsessed with, Pinhead, So Satanism and all that was definitely, my parents did have a priest come over to bless my bedroom, I guess, one time when I wasn't home.
Yeah.
So there was this sort of concern about me, but, and I think about this now, Heathers coming out when it did, we could enjoy it as a fantasy in a way that we could not now. And when Columbine happened, I remember sitting there and watching it and being kind of like devastated because in no way, shape, or form was my love of the movie Heathers anything more than a fantasy.
Of course.
I never actually wanted to murder people. The fantasy of seeing the jocks and the bitches get murdered was fabulous, but it was always a fantasy. And I remember with Columbine, it was kind of like, wow, not only do I know that everyone in my high school graduating class is thinking about me today.
Oh, right.
Because if anyone was going to do that...
Right.
You know what I mean?
The trench coat and
the style. But I was thinking I never in my wildest dreams would have entertained that.
No.
And now we live in a world where the idea of killing your classmates is just so common.
Right. And even the scene when Christian Slater scares the shit out of the guys with the blanks.
Yeah.
Watching that again, because you kind of forget about certain scenes.
Right.
And you see that and you're like, oh my God. And you talk about things that would never make it into a movie now.
Never.
You're like, 2018, forget about it.
Yeah.
And I actually had that moment because we're from the South, so it's like everybody does hunting, like shooting
Oh,
guns is
right,
a very normal
right.
thing. Like someone accidentally coming to school with a gun in their car is actually a very common thing. And
Right.
at least when I was in sort of elementary school, middle school, high school, like I graduated in 2003. So, yeah, you can't do that now.
Yeah, no.
That was my
right.
reaction.
It would
And
be-
seeing that, I was like, oh, you can't do that now.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same, like coming from a place like that, which like compared to California, like, bitches, you don't know what goth looks like. Like you're upset about my all black clothes. Police. Like you do not even begin to understand. But it was down to like my grandmother being like, I will literally pay you not to dye your hair black. Like
Oh,
that's
wow.
how much it upsets me. That's how much of a connotation I think it brings. Like that presentation. And this was before Columbine. Like now,
Yeah.
Sure.
like now you could look at that sort of look and be like, ooh, that makes me a little uncomfortable. Maybe you're having some emotional disturbance. But like back then, it was just they just didn't like
it's kind of
it.
unfair because it's that thing where it's like, I do think there's a difference between the Columbine kids and the kids that go to their school and shoot them up. They're not the artist, weirdo, goth
No,
kids.
no,
they're
no,
really
they're
not,
not.
you
They're
know?
not.
It's something else. But because of the way that played out in the media, and because they emphasize so much those trench coats and, you know,
But
all of that.
I think it goes two ways. It's like, okay, maybe these kids who have found a channel to express themselves are not a threat, but perhaps it's the kids who have just as much feelings but have not found that channel to express themselves who
Right.
are dangerous, you know?
Absolutely.
It's like you find theater, you find all this extra, and then you find community, then you find people, then you understand there is something to this life to, you know, the whole "it gets better" campaign.
Well,
you know, like
sure.
you have a whole vision around it.
And then, unfortunately, when that stuff is stepped on by authorities, kids made to feel like bad, or parents made to feel freaked out that their kid is maybe interested in theater or whatever, music, goth, whatever, then that's a real drag too, because you've found your little tunnel and someone's trying to close it.
Yes, especially in those gender conforming type of areas and times where it's like, how dare you have theater? No, with your pansy bullshit. I'm definitely from that sort of area where it's like any type of nonconformity is unacceptable. So in each gender, there are, you know,
A whole host of...
a whole host of things
Yeah.
to tell on you.
Lindsay has another question. She says, would you guys ever do a Peaches and Craig event in San Francisco, but make it for 18 plus for those of us who are not 21, but very close to being?
Sure.
Sound fun to me.
A live podcast.
That'd be-
That's something that, you know.
Yes.
I would love to do
then they could see the full drag realness I'm presenting right now.
Exactly.
I saw
exactly,
it. I touched
right.
it. I felt it. I was in the presence of the power.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
glorious.
I'm squinting because of all the magic glamour
Yeah,
that's
It was
coming
so,
out right now.
exactly.
Yeah.
so good.
Now, Kel Adams writes, greetings and salutations. Wow, so many freaking awesome movies are being thrown in the hot dog flavored water pot that is Movie Club. Well, thank you, Kel. I'm glad that you're enjoying all the selections. A hearty, porky wiener thanks. Heather's is most definitely, alongside Pump Up the Volume, my favorite Christian Slater film. The peak of the late 80s, early 90s teen angst flicks. The cast, the drama, the fuckery, the fashion. This is yet another greatly quotable movie. As we mentioned, so many iconic moments. Teenage suicide, don't do it. Then the scene with the croquet, Martha dump truck, and the big fun t-shirt. That is such an incredible image. And when she has the indignity of the beverage spilling all over her before she goes to tape the suicide note on and fail at suicide, which is then used against her, the best example of how rotten the cool kids in quotes can be to
Yes.
the
And I have to say, in leading up to this, that iconic moment of I don't remember his character name, Christian Slater's character,
JD.
JD, going to Shannon Doherty, Heather, and being like, well, you know, it's your turn. Right. And then
Right.
Veronica
Yeah.
is so pissed off that like another Heather is gone in Heather's place, as if JD wasn't the one who came all along and was like, Sprout, baby Sprout.
Right. Yeah, it's like he needs that bad energy in order for him to
otherwise
justify.
there's no reason, because then it's just about his own personal negative, like sensitive feelings, and then aren't you just another one of the fucking sheep who is this like emotional?
Yeah, and he masks that all with this tough guy weirdness that's inherited from his dad. And that's a whole other trope that I love in the movie. It's basically saying that these industrial kings are just savage sociopaths. And it seems to be okay, and people look the other way because clearly there's a history of him getting arraigned but not convicted. He's blowing up the library that his mother happens to go into, but he just moves from town to town because his business is very big, and they get away with it.
Even back then, it was kind of like we understood what they were saying. And again, showing this movie to people of a certain age right now, it has a completely different impact because young people now have grown up in an era with high school violence, with murder, and with Trump as president. So we were watching this sort of allegory, if you will, in this sort of fantasy way of understanding that these are ridiculous, almost poetic, metaphorical ideas about the evil that exists in high school and the evil that exists in capitalist corporate America. And now we live in a world where this is normal.
Right.
That's just insane because when this movie came out, I mean, we didn't have these sorts of news reports.
No. We didn't accept it as normal. Even if it was, like, we had this plausible deniability that,
we did.
Proper society, but never.
But even government, I mean, was it corrupt? Was it awful? Sure, but nothing like we're dealing with right now.
No, there was the indignities of the end of the Reagan era and then going into George Bush Sr.'s first thing, but it all seems tame compared to anything now.
It does, and there's such a nuanced take on misogyny where you see everyone from the rapist football player to JD being I'm sort of nice but not. I'm the anarchist, in between, to the yearbook guy even being nice but still trying to sexually take advantage of you in that moment. Or it's she's trying to defuse the bomb of the school and she's like, what's below the gym? And he's like, oh, it's the boiler room.
Right. All suggestive with the boiler room.
I guess in a way that's a positive change, right? So with the things that are kind of horrifying are that gun violence and our president basically being in bed with Russian oligarchs is our reality right now. So,
and the bullying that's just taken as
rampant but on the flip side, I would hope that young women and young girls in a there is a positive side to these dark sides, right? Where we have young people who are pushing, who've elected, AOC and, push politics in a different direction. And there's a post Me Too movement and a post grab them by the pussy sort of women's marches and things where hopefully now women in high school, some would go fuck off, there would be a different response to this sort of thing. It's surreal. So maybe it's not. Maybe we're definitely in a less good position in many ways because that was a fantasy and it didn't really feel like it was reality. But then in other ways, I feel like especially young people have grown up disillusioned by the American dream and understand misogyny and racism and class warfare in a new way.
To hear the rest of this movie club, head on over to patreon.com/Craig and Friends, slide on into the Thunder Buns Hot Dog Club, and then unlock the ocean of material that's waiting for you there. Hot Dog Club exclusives like you wouldn't believe. Bonus episodes, listener questions episodes, taping one tomorrow with the fabulous Goth Charlotte, another one later in the month with Crystal. Other movie clubs available there. Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead with Alaska, A Star is Born, and Casino. 2 separate shows, of course, with Willem. The Fifth Element with Ms. Cracker. Body Double with Katya. And Legend, one that's kind of a controversial one because the movie itself is not so good, but the show makes up for it. Drop Dead Gorgeous with Trixie Mattel. The list goes on. There's so many. Anyway, sign up now and let your ears get filthy with the magic of Hot Dog Club and Movie Club.